Hi there, my name is Emma Blaskowitz, and today my group is going to be talking about the subject of gift giving. The members of my group are Kenesha Anderson, Randy McClellan, Jordan Martinez, and Celine Castillo. The topic of gift giving within the field of ABA has both pros and cons sides that will be addressed during this presentation. Gift giving has the potential to cause bribery, to lead or to contribute to a potentially hazardous relationship between the clients and the provider. ABA is oftentimes conducted within the client's home, and it has the potential for a dual relationship to develop. For this reason, some of us are going to advocate against gift giving. On the flip side, for the pro side, gift giving can be a way to show affection, and in some cultures, it is what people do is give gifts to who is coming within their home. So it could be seen as just that you are not giving attention to them or that you don't care about them if you weren't to receive this gift. Some parents would show their gratitude and happiness through gift giving, and it may be rude or insensitive to deny them this opportunity. For the sake of this debate, the pro side will be in support of the BACB compliance code as it stands, while the con side is against the current compliance code. Now I am going to turn it over to Celine, who is for the compliance code.
Hi, my name is Celine Castillo, and I am arguing pro-compliance code. I think that it's important to start this debate with a clear understanding of what a dual relationship is and what I mean when I say a dual relationship. So a dual relationship or a multiple relationship is a situation where multiple roles exist between a therapist or other mental health practitioner and a client. So this can include situations like attending a client's birthday party, or going to dinner with a client's family, or even accepting gifts from a client's family. So my argument discusses how accepting gifts can lead to dual relationships. And each topic within my argument explains how the act of accepting gifts has serious negative implications on BCBAs in the ABA field. BCBAs work in the client's home, and therefore they need to make sure that they're abiding by ethical guidelines by not accepting bribes and remaining objective. When you accept gifts, you're at risk for things like multiple relationship, and multiple relationships can affect the integrity of the work that BCBAs do. BCBAs often work with clients and their caregivers in such an extensive and intensive manner that multiple relationships are prone to arise. And if they are prone to arise, then they really need to be guarded against. And even though BCBAs may work in the client's home, they're there as professionals, and they should not be treated as guests or people there to socialize. So I am going to be explaining a couple scenarios that I think could arise and kind of going through the things that I feel could be problematic with them. So my first scenario says, you've been working in a client's home as a BCBA for 2 years. You have developed a very close relationship with the client's family. The client offers you 2 tickets to Disneyland because they know that you and your family's favorite place to vacation. What is wrong with this scenario? So some things that I see that are wrong here are that because you've been working so closely with the family, that they automatically think that it's okay to offer you gifts. And working in the client's home made this BCBA even more at risk for developing this dual relationship. So even before services start, it's really important that the family understands that gifts are prohibited for BCBAs under the compliance code that they follow. And if the BCBA accepts the gift, then the BCBA needs to understand that they've entered into a dual relationship and all the issues that arise with that. So it's important to remember that for BCBAs, they're in the client's home, but they're there as professionals providing a medically necessary service, and therefore they also needed to refrain from disclosing too much personal information or anecdotes. There is a fine line between, someone coming into your home as a friend or, someone who you can confide in and a professional who's trying to do their job. So the BACB explained in their newsletter why it's so important to protect against dual relationships. The newsletter said that a dual relationship reasonably might impair the behavior analyst's objectivity or otherwise interfere with the behavior analyst's ability to effectively perform his or her functions as a behavior analyst, or might harm or exploit the other party. And so I think it's really important because, a lot of times people in the ABA field are compared to teachers. And yes, people in this field, we do teach, clients with disabilities, very important skills, and we do teach them some academic skills, but we also teach them so much more than that. We teach them things like language, like just even being able to command or say their name and personal information and things that we take for granted like that. And so because we're working so closely with the family, it's almost impossible to completely guard against dual relationships. And so it's really important that, BCBAs and the ABA field has these boundaries up, because we affect how the family's everyday lives run, by the things that we're teaching the client. And so it makes sense that the client depends and trusts in us. So we just have to make sure that we're staying objective. And objectivity is really important in this field, because sometimes you have to explain things that the family may not agree with, or that they don't know that they're doing that, they could take very personally, because in some instances, the family's reinforcing some maladaptive behaviors, and they don't always want to see that, or they don't want to hear it. So objectivity moves us into our next scenario, which says, as a BCBA, you have gotten to know a client's family well over the last few years. You have accepted small gifts from the family several times. The client's family has recently implemented a punishment procedure that you do not think is ethical. You have tried to talk to the parents, but they say that they are going to keep doing the procedure. You don't follow up with the family because of all they've done for you. What is wrong with this scenario? So the biggest issue, hands down here, is that by accepting the gifts and developing that dual relationship with the family, the BCBA's objectivity was affected. And as a BCBA, if you truly believe that what a family is doing is unethical, you need to take the appropriate steps to correct the issue. And this could even lead to things like termination of services. In this case, the BCBA initially explained why they disagreed with the family's punishment procedure, but they then gave up when the family decided to not change their methods. BCBAs really need to be objective to adequately provide treatment to clients who need their help. Accepting gifts and establishing that dual relationship affected the BCBA's objectivity, and, in essence, it affected the field of ABA as a practice. I think a gift-giving policy is a really good start, but I think that it's equally important for organizations and companies to prepare, everyone, like all their staff members, to handle this kind of gift encounter. It's important for the professional to understand the intention of this behavior and also respond in a way that continues to strengthen the professional relationship. And I think a really valuable point is that the monetary value of a gift is often an indicator whether personal professional boundaries have been crossed. But a really big point is that, the intention of the gift is probably the greatest concern. So why am I receiving this gift? Like, what is the function of this behavior? So my next scenario says, you have been working with a family for 5 years. The client has made significant progress, but still requires some work in the social curriculum. You have been accepting gifts, both large and small, from the family for your entire professional relationship. Recently, the parents have been asking you to babysit because they can't trust anyone else. You tell them that you can't, but the parents are saying that they've done so much for you over the years, so it's only fair. What are the major problems here? So it was kind of a chain reaction. So by accepting gifts, then you enter into a dual relationship. When you enter into the dual relationship, then you are at risk for the client's family bribing you. So it just started with these small gifts, and it led to these larger favors. And I don't by any means assume that this scenario is very common, but it does make sense as to why the compliance code is so strict. The compliance code wants to protect both the client and the BCBA from entering into a dual relationship and blurring the lines between professional and familial. So ultimately, accepting gifts is a slippery slope where the client could want something in return. And the BACB wants to ensure that the professional relationship that BCBAs build with the client's family don't turn into personal relationships. Even if BCBAs were to put a cap on the gifts they receive, they would then be responsible for, guessing the retail of the gift, which sometimes could have more cultural value than monetary, which just makes things kind of awkward. And an even more awkward situation would be if you were able to accept some gifts but deny others, or you accept a gift and then later you find out how much it costs. It's very unlikely that a client's going to offer a gift and then you're going to be like, oh, hold on 1 second, let me Google how much that costs. So it just puts BCBAs and people in the ABA field in really awkward situations. And I think that, there's some antecedents we should do beforehand. And I know a lot of companies do this, where they prepare all the staff members on how to react when a client or family offers them a gift. And also it's really important that we explain to the families too, before they even start services, why we're there and what our purpose is and what we ethically are and aren't allowed to do. So the Declaration of Professional Practices and Procedures for Behavior Analysts is a really great resource, and it has a really great script on, what you can say to families. And actually, it's this whole page where families can sign off that they've read it and, this information's been disclosed. And it says that although our relationship involves very personal interactions and discussions, I need you to realize that we have a professional relationship rather than a social one. According to my professional code of ethics, it is not appropriate for me to accept gifts or meals, and it is not appropriate for me to be involved with your personal activities, such as birthday parties or family outings. So this is just reiterating to families before they even start services what we are and aren't allowed to do. And it kind of gives families a better idea of the fact that, we're not guests in the home. And to do our jobs even more effectively, we'd want them to, almost act like we weren't there sometimes, so that we can observe what's happening in this environment. And, we are able to uncover why certain behaviors are happening and the functions and, all of the environmental issues that are occurring. So altogether, the reason that BACB has such a strict code of compliance is because BCBAs are at a very high risk for multiple relationships, and thus they need to be professionally and ethically guarded to protect the field of ABA and their own personal reputation. So now I'll turn it over to Jordan, who will be arguing the con side of this debate.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Martinez. I'm going to be stating and proving the con side of this argument, and let's just go ahead and get into it. All right, so the con side here means we are against the compliance code. What that means is that we're not saying that we need to completely scratch the compliance code, we need to completely do away with it, but that it should be modified, because right now, as it stands, it's extremely restrictive in nature and might end up actually doing more harm than good. In addition, even with all of the restrictive language, it doesn't completely protect from dual relationships. There's a good chance that dual relationships will still arise even with our gift-giving policy as is. So let's go ahead and talk about the potential social and cultural harm that could arise from our gift-giving policy. The social implications of gift-giving are really, really well researched and understood. We'll get into that a little bit later. But basically the takeaway point here is that we teach kids how and why to give gifts. But if they generalize that behavior, if they succeed in generalizing it, we're forced to punish them or risk being in violation of our compliance code, which doesn't make a lot of logical sense. Next, when you look at cultures, culturally, a lot of people find it offensive if you reject a gift. Take Greek cultures, for example, they'll continue to offer you a gift until you accept it. A lot of places are very similar to America, like Spain, where if the gift is too extravagant, it could be seen as a bribe. But then there's places like China and Japan where it's really cool. The act of gift giving is actually more important than the gift itself. So like the reason behind the gift giving has more significance than, you know, what the material value actually is. Additionally, like gift giving predates civilization. When you look back historically to like cavemen and Neanderthals, they used to give each other weird rocks like, hey man, thanks for not letting that bison get me on the hunt. And here's like a really cool strange stone or like an animal tooth that I found because you're awesome and you keep the fire going. Or, you know, Romans used to give each other random sticks that they found on the ground, like, hey man, good luck in the Colosseum today. Here's a stick. So basically, what I'm trying to bring to your attention here is that not all gifts are bribes. Since the beginning of humanity, gifts have meant a ton of different things. They can be meant to show gratitude, appreciation, even altruism. This is a quote by Reamer. This article is particularly significant because it deals with the ethics of professionals who work with children. And in this study, they found that typically gifts represent tokens of appreciation, nothing more, nothing less. And that the client might actually feel hurt, wounded, humiliated, or guilty if you reject a gift on, you know, clinical, if you decide to reject a gift for clinical or ethical reasons. And when you remember that one of the main tenets, one of our main philosophies in ABA is to do no harm, this just really stands out as an issue. Next, let's move on to the restrictive nature. So other ethical codes pretty much all have some type of gift-giving policy. You'd be hard-pressed to find one without it. But ours is relatively extreme. When you look at the language of the code, authorities on legal writing actually urge people not to use any and all because it could get you into a lot of sticky situations down the line legally. I used to teach SAT, and in my SAT prep courses, one of the things that you learn is that you should avoid multiple choice answers with any and all because nothing is so all-inclusive. There's that saying that the only absolute is there are no absolutes, and I think that that's something really to keep in the back of your head as we continue this presentation. And then what is this really saying? Like because of the language here, like what is our code really telling us? What is it allowing us to do? When it comes to the caliber of gifts, I understand like do not accept any Ferraris, do not accept any vacations. You know, that makes sense. But this code, the language as it currently stands means that I can accept a handmade card from my client or a drawing that they give me. If I'm going to a home session and I start coughing and a mom offers me water, I have to decline it or risk being in violation of my code. And I know it seems silly and extreme, but technically that is what the language states. And I know it gets really tricky because it's not like a professional to professional code, it's professionals with children a lot of the times, and they don't necessarily understand codes of ethics. So I'd like to draw your attention here to a few other codes that I think do a great job of protecting both the client and the professional without such a restrictive nature that it might actually cause more harm than good. So look at the Florida Department of Education. The language here is just so starkly different. Don't do anything to gain personal advantage. Don't do anything that might influence personal judgment. Don't offer a gift or a favor to obtain special advantages. Here, the focus is really on the function and the effect of the gift giving, not necessarily on what they're giving you. They leave some leeway for you to be able to, reinforce that positive human nature gift-giving behavior. The social workers code of compliance is super, super important. I brought this into my presentation because I wanted you guys to understand that, yes, we go into the homes, and so that makes us different from teachers, but there's other professionals that also go into the homes and work with children in different types of settings, and they've managed to come up with codes and red flags and boundaries that they've set that work. So it's just something that we could look at maybe for some inspiration or help in the future. So this code here, the social workers code, says that they actually don't prohibit accepting gifts at all. They just have provisions related to gifts. Don't take unfair advantage of a professional relationship, and set clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. That's a big one. Not a lot of other codes of ethics talk about culturally sensitive boundaries, and that's just so huge because this day and age, we live in a melting pot. They then go on to talk about red flags, some red flags, like if there's any notion of quid pro quo, like you're doing this in order to get something in return, or if it's like not a special occasion or a holiday, obviously you need to take special note of that. Basically, the main takeaway here is that there are ways to protect against bribery and corruption without compromising the social benefits of gift giving. And finally, dual relationships may still arise, even with all of the restrictive language. Like, we're not completely protecting from dual relationships. The essence of our work makes it super, super easy for these relationships to arise. This quote here, it prides itself on the use of the self, the person in the process. I once had a teacher tell me that we have to be the cookie in ABA, basically be the reinforcer. You have to make the child want your attention and want to interact with you. And in order to do that, we have to sing and dance and play and jump around, and none of that is exactly professional behavior. Then in addition to that, I go into your home for like 3-4 hours a day, 4 or 5 times a week. I meet your family. I know your pets' names. I smell the food you cook. Like, that is inevitably going to affect the way that we interact. Consider a family that, like I just explained, that you go into their house 4 or 5 times a week for multiple hours each day. The way that you interact with them and communicate with them is inevitably going to be different than the way that you interact with a parent that you see pick up their kid for 5 minutes at the beginning and end of each session. Basically, the nature of our work requires us to interact with the child on multiple levels. We've all heard, okay, it's time to work, it's time to play. So multiple relationship, yes, they can be dangerous, but are they really the worst thing ever? When you consider that everything alters our relationship on some level. Ultimately, what this comes down to is an issue of absolutism versus relativism. I put some points up there, some main points for each ethical side up for you guys to look at. But I really, really want to draw your attention to the fact that the nature of ABA is relativist. We are all about single subject designs. We are all about individual treatment plans and having everything catered to each specific client. So why is our code of ethics so absolute? Why do we have a code of ethics that we think will be common to everyone and unchanging and have to hold true in all situations, when we know that, like, it's literally written in our code, everything has to be individually catered to every client. Finally, we are trusted to scientifically determine the function of a behavior. And when you consider that gift giving is a behavior, I just think it's kind of like we're making a mountain out of a molehill. There's no reason for gift giving to be seen as this like terrible thing that's going to cause trouble and strife and problems with every aspect of our professional relationship. So some solutions, we touched on them earlier. We can look to other codes of ethics. There's ways we can document and report our gifts. There are price points we can use. There are guidelines we can put in place where, you know, it doesn't have to be such a strict absolute code when we're in a relativist field. So just to recap real quick, our stance is against the compliance code as it currently stands. This no gifts rule is lazy and absolutist, and it doesn't even protect fully from dual relationships. So the fact that it could do more harm than good socially and culturally really, really needs to be considered, because the client needs to be of the utmost importance, and our main goal should be to do no harm. So yeah, don't scratch it completely, but just modify it. And now I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Kanisha.
Hi, hello. My name is Kanisha Anderson, and I am pro BACB Code of Ethics, which states behavior analysts do not accept any gifts from or give any gifts to clients because this constitutes as a multiple relationship. As mentioned, there is a cultural aspect to take into consideration when deciding whether accepting a gift is acceptable in practice. However, to only accept gifts from different cultures in fear of offending them will be potentially seen as discrimination to people of the cultures who don't have those same values. Yes, as board certified behavior analysts, we are teaching children the value of sharing, but we also need to remain equal and fair to everyone of service. And equality is also another important value we should teach and model for children as well. To only accept gifts from one culture or group of people and not from others is not the image we should want to portray to anyone. Of course, there will be many situations where some of our clients are from many different cultural backgrounds and may believe in the aspect of showing gratitude by giving gifts. But as board certified behavior analysts, we must remain fair to everyone. And in my and our best option will be to not accept any form of gifts. Of course, we can't completely control the behaviors of others, but in this field, we do learn the importance of antecedent interventions. And antecedent intervention in this situation is just some proactive measures to ensure all clients will know that gift giving isn't acceptable. Before therapy begins, it is required by the BACB Code of Ethics that behavior analysts obtain a signed contract outlining the responsibilities of all parties, the scope of behavior, analytic service to be provided, and behavior analysts' obligations under this code. This contract is known as an informed consent. Many clinics also take another step in preventing gift giving as well by having their own company policy. And in this company policy, many clinics write in the company policy that states that gift giving is prohibited. So if a situation as such ever arises, the provider will be able to politely reject the gift without causing intentional harm. I'll jump right into my PowerPoint. So yes, the BCBA Code of Ethics may seem just black and white with no gray area. However, it is important that this is maintained. In previous years, there was a time when there were no code of ethics to follow, and that left a very unwanted effect on the field as a whole. So as you can see on the screen, we ended up here with the Code of Ethics from the Sunland scandal, which happened in Florida in 1972. It was a former hospital that turned into a medical dorm for children with special needs. There were horrendous acts under the guise of behavior modifications such as beatings, electroshocks, isolation, humiliation, and straitjacket restraints, just to name a few. Poorly trained staff were told to emphasize natural consequences, devise own immediate response, and follow through with every contingency. This led to the Blue Ribbon Panel and the development of the Code of Ethics. They developed the statewide advocacy program to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again, unannounced visits to check on facilities and to collect information from residents, parents, and staff, recommend peer review of procedures, which led to better treatment, set into motion protective legislation. And of course, our number one rule in ABA is to do no harm, which I believe is the reason why gift giving should not be a big issue. And the fact that you deny the gift should not be a big issue, because we should, as behavior analysts, we should want to focus on the client and their need versus whether or not we're going to accept a gift from the family. It's ways to politely say no. And having a contract agreement is one of the ways that can protect a BCBA's own rights and their own ethical guidelines to follow. So although gift giving should not open doors for abuse as such that happened in the Sunland scandal, these codes were created to either prevent a situation from arising or because a similar situation did arise and it wasn't handled properly, or the whole idea of gift giving was abused. What may seem like a small gesture to one person may not hold the same value to everyone. For example, like on the spring, a family may give a behavior analyst a $10 gift card on one day, and this is a small amount, but if the family gave them this same amount, a gift card every day or every other day, when can you draw the line on what's acceptable or not acceptable once you've already started accepting? As mentioned plenty of times throughout life in many quotes, don't start something you can't or do not want to finish. And this is an example of an unwanted possibility that comes with gift giving that can lead to being able to unfinish. And now I am passing this on to Randy, who is against the compliance code.
All right. Everyone. Against the current compliance. Okay. I don't think they could hear me for a second. Well, let me try this again. In against the current compliance code's gift giving policy, we believe that it could be a case-by-case basis. This is how behavior analysts develop programs, their behavior, their reinforcements, and almost everything else in the ABA. According to the authors in the article Opening the Gift, professionals to accept courtesy gifts in order to have a good relationship. There is the possibility of relating and bringing. The BACB newsletter for 2015 covers the intention and effects of giving. Exchanges are found during the course of an investigation. Therefore, that tells us that there were bigger issues involved before discovering that the gifts even happened. Places have ethical codes as well, but they have some sort of monetary cap or a basis. When looking into other professions, and according to an article by Anderson, 2011, and the American Medical Associations, gifts from patients are almost entirely looked at case by case. Rules to determine when a physician should or shouldn't accept a gift. Overall, we believe that there should definitely be a portion about gift giving in the ethical code, but it is far too strict. As you can see right here on my visual, I have 1.06D here. Behavior analysts do not accept any gifts or give any gifts to clients because this constitutes as a multiple relationship. We have here a little girl picked flowers, handmade cards, and balloons. For positions, there's no fixed value to determine if the gift is appropriate or not. We are not stating that there should be no ethical code, but maybe even a dollar amount as small as $5 or $10 maybe would make it allowed for behavior analysts to accept handmade gifts or even cards, or to give a card or handmade gifts. For example, if you had a client who was graduating from ABA and you wanted to bring in balloons, that's technically not even allowed. While I definitely think of extreme value to influence the relationship, small tokens shouldn't be so strictly prohibited. There are other aspects that may add to crossing the professional boundary, not just gift giving. As Jordan stated, we're in their home. Meeting their family and their pets could do this just as well.
To close out this debate, I wanted to say the following quote from Anthony Biglin. The quality of human life, perhaps even the survival of life as we know it, depends on finding ways to make everyone's environment more nurturing, less coercive, and more caring, supportive of human development, and focused on doing what works. This quote from Biglin highlights the importance that we as humans are all dependent on one another. Our actions have the power to hurt and they have the power to heal. The issue of gift giving has two sides that the group members above did a wonderful job at discussing. Points were argued against giving, showing the true fact that it could lead to a multiple relationship. It also could create an unwanted environment of bribery. With a lot of ABA services being conducted within the client's home, it is an important fact to consider that gifts could essentially blur the lines of professional and personal conduct. However, there were points that were made for the support of giving gifts. Various cultures use gifts as a means of expressing thanks, and it is important that we do not disrespect or break trust with the families of those that we serve. In conclusion, both sides made valid points to address the issue of gift giving within the field of ABA. We thank you so much for watching this presentation and hope you enjoyed it.